BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Here on top of the moss we have a tiny little sundew. So sundew are one of our carnivorous species. Because the bog environment is quite nutrient poor, we have these carnivorous species that are instead feeding on insects. They're a beautiful red colour, and then they have these sticky hairs which have a dew kind of looking like substance on them. And that attracts in insects which think they're coming for a nice drink, and then they get stuck and the leaves will curl up around them.
Millie Revel-Hayward works for the RSPB here at the Forcenard National Nature Reserve.
This is us on the Dulochen Trail boardwalk, so this takes us out to our Flows Lookout Tower.
We're in the middle of a vast windy sea of flat brown vegetation in the far north of Scotland. It's pretty wet and it's a bleak and lonely place, but this is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and Millie is my guide to the nature of what's known as the flow country.
The pool systems don't form unless you're in really good blanket bog, but they're really quite spectacular. You can see newts and dragonfly and damselfly larvae, and they'll be flying over those pools as well in the warm summer months when the sun is shining.
Not like today.
Not like today. It's quite a flat landscape, it's very expansive, it maybe doesn't look very interesting from a distance. But what you really need to do is get out onto the blanket bog. Even get down onto your hands and knees and have a look at what's below you, because it's not one big shade of brown. It's actually beautiful greens and yellows and reds in the sphagnum mosses, and there's purple flowers from the heathers, which, I mean, even at the moment, they're really, really beautiful. You have your sundews and the cotton grasses swaying in the wind and the bog asphodel.
The place is especially a haven for birds. They include the curlew and the red-throated loon.
This is us heading up our Flows Lookout Tower. The bog is maybe not somewhere that a lot of people would come, seeing, oh, there's a tower out there. It draws people out a little bit.
And you can see this pool system now covering several hectares.
And you don't appreciate actually how far it goes until you have that bit of elevation. We want to create bog tourism. We want people to come here to explore the peatlands, to fall in love with them, to tell their friends and family. People coming and visiting the bog and loving it.
The flow country, or Flows to use the local pronunciation, became a World Heritage Site after a group including government agencies, businesses, farmers, conservation groups and others put together a bid to become one, with a view to helping the local economy and environment. In July this year, the status was confirmed. But what impact is it having?
We've got a 100 kilowatt log burner. We buy the logs that are being felled as part of the peatland restoration on the flow country. We cut them, split them and stack them. These basically keep us warm. I'm Jason Watts. I'm the owner of Force of Nature, which is an old listed building that we use as a venue, hospitality, accommodation, cafe, craft shop.
Tourism in this region has been helped in recent years by the North Coast 500, a driving route that goes around the edges. The allure of the bog is now sucking people into the interior.
With the flow's new designation, that highlights how important that is in terms of the nature and the wildlife, the scenery as well. Those fast tourists are diminishing, and we're seeing a lot more of the slow tourists that are interested in nature and things. So rather than sticking to the NC 500, they're making that detour and stopping and taking time to really explore the flow country as part of that. Slow tourism, people enjoying the scenery, enjoying nature.
Brilliant, so these are fantastic. beautiful and red with the greens behind them, so the colours in the picture should look really lovely. Get this tripod nice and low. These are Flyagaria, I think. I'm Janet Southard and I'm part owner of Wild Arena with my husband David Southard.
And Wild Arena is?
A photography business. So the World Heritage status for us, for the tea room that we run here at the lodge, we've had a few people coming through already, especially from Europe, who have said that they know it's World Heritage status, so they've come to see it for that. And we are the only tea room round here for 15 miles, so we have got a bit of a captive audience, so we do expect that to grow. The World Heritage status here is for the peat bog, so that in itself, pulling photographers in, might not be the case, although it's our job to show people how fantastic that is and try and persuade them to come up here. It can be so beautiful. There's the fungi, frogs, toads in summer, butterflies, dragonflies, but then the open landscape itself, when you've got beautiful lighting, which you get up here quite a lot, so the opportunities for photography are actually quite endless. The abundance of red deer up here is good. There's otters, there are sea eagles, so there is a lot of wildlife, but it is very spread out.
We have a couple of cottages on lake, and what I've noticed is that people are staying longer.
Joyce Campbell is a farmer on the northern edge of the flow country.
The bookings initially were for 1 night, 2 nights. Now it's a week, 10 days, 2 weeks. They're wanting to go wild swimming. They're wanting to go and see a golden eagle. They're wanting to go and do some bird watching. It's a different type of tourism we're getting. I see the benefits of World Heritage status as that it is a selling point, an extra tag that we can put on what already is a beautiful area. I'm seeing my bookings change very differently, and bookings right throughout the year, no longer just the summer holidays, but actually through the spring, through the winter, the quieter spells.
Growing appreciation of the bog's importance led to wind farm developers being told to restore peatland as a condition of planning permission. That meant them paying Joyce so they could restore flow country peatland on her farm.
So we're in one of our holiday lets, the most recent one that we renovated, and just ready to start doing lets.
It's absolutely beautiful inside.
Thank you.
But the key to this was you used green money.
Green finance. So I used the money that I made the agreement with SSE Renewables, that they restored 160 hectares of land. And I still own the land, I still can graze the land. The cottage itself, the old part, dates back to 1815 when it was a shepherd's bothy, and we've kept the traditional feel of it and put a nice wraparound extension with an air source pump, insulated, everything that you would really want to do, but just we didn't have the cash flow, and the agreement we made with them has enabled us to give us another income stream.
That's resulted directly from the desire to restore the flow country.
Yes, and it fits in with that actually people can come and stay just within the flow country and then go and investigate it and understand it and actually get an appreciation of what the money is doing. We're not running off. I didn't go off and have fun holidays. You used a local trades company to do the building. You used the local auction mart, which has furniture sales, to get my furniture, and our own wool in the blinds, the curtains, and the blankets on the beds and the cushions. The brown blankets are the colour of the flow country. When the UNESCO World Heritage site was unveiled, it was one of our brown blankets that was gifted to the King. They said he's going to go fishing with it. It's got its own special atmosphere. It can be wet in summer and winter.
Joyce farms sheep and beef across 5,000 acres, and in recent years she's changed her operation to embrace working with nature.
It also is alive with animals and bird life, and it's a living landscape and we're living in it and we're part of it. It's where I'm grounded, it's my home, and it's where I've worked all my life. It's somewhere I love very dearly. That's a hill drain that was put in the 60s and the 70s, just responding to what the government at the time was asking of landowners and land managers, was to drain the hill to improve grazing.
So Joyce, if you're restoring that back to bog, how do you go about it?
There's various different techniques of taking a scoop of peat from next door to the drain, popping it in the drain, mounding it. So then you also have a wet area created, another pool system created beside the drain, and then slowing the flow of the water off the hill. What we're wanting to do is hold the water back and raise the water table.
A Green Finance Initiative scheme has been set up to help Flow Country landowners get government grants for more bog restoration. That includes restoring areas that have been drained and also large areas planted with commercial forestry in the 1970s and 1980s, largely thanks to a government tax incentive. Now, of course, planting trees on peat is seen as a very bad idea indeed, as it releases the carbon locked in the peat and the trees grown are pretty poor, so they're being removed. Tim Cockerell of Forestry and Land Scotland, what was the Forestry Commission, has brought me to one of their sites on the edge of the Flow Country to show me how tree removal and bog restoration is done.
What you'll notice there is the way the site was ploughed when the trees were originally planted. So a plough went through, turned out a furrow about 80 centimetres deep.
Can we get down there and have a look?
Yep, sure. These furrows, even though the trees are gone, they're still acting as a drainage channel. The ridge, the plough ridge you've got here, was the original bit that was turned out from the plough furrow. And this area is dry peat, and that is all degrading and oxidising and releasing CO2 into the atmosphere. What we're trying to do when we restore this site is effectively put that ridge back into the furrow to try and stop that water flow and get the water table back up to where it should be. And if we can do that, there's a reasonable chance that this bog will start and act as a near-natural phenomena and lock up carbon and produce the peatland vegetation that we're looking for that will actually build the bog again. And the trees off this site were cleared over the summer, and this part of the site has now been restored and re-wetted. So we've gone through a process of what we call ground smoothing, where we've tried to put the plough ridges back into the furrows. The machine, in the process of doing that, has sort of tracked over the machine and left the surface relatively level. What's very obvious about this site is that it's very wet. There's water lying on the surface, which is an indicator that the water table is now back up where it should be, you know, if this is going to be a functional bog.
Bienvenue dans la tourbière de Forcinard, la plus grande tourbière d'Europe.
That not very Scottish welcome was from Anna Groselier, a Parisian with a passion for nature who now helps supervise what's known as forest to bog work for the RSPB on the Forcinard Reserve. She's driven me up onto the high ground on the east of the reserve.
Most of what we can see from here has been restored, and that kind of gives you an idea of how it can look from a distance like this, look almost natural.
I mean, it looks like pristine peat bog from here, really, from sitting in the car, looking out.
So different areas, if you get your eye in, you can see that it was forested when you have a bit of parallel lines.
We stayed in the car there because it's actually very windy up here, and now we've taken a bit of cover by some trees that are still here. You can see here how much of a difference the forestry has made to the landscape. There's a ridge over 1 metre high.
You can see on that ridge how the peat has a greyish colour that's crumbling away.
Dust, isn't it?
Yeah. Healthy wet peat is a rich, dark, almost black brown, and really, really wet and squelchy. You can see how little biodiversity is in those plots of standing forestry.
If you go home to Paris, where you're
Yes.
from, and say to people I work on a huge bog in the north of Scotland, what do they think?
Interesting question. I think this is a place that needs a bit of explanation for people to kind of understand it properly and connect to it. It's not a 2-minute, ooh, this is what I do. If I really want kind of people that I meet or friends and family to understand it, I have to explain a little bit. A few years ago, I realized that my family didn't even know that much about my work, and so I gathered a whole lot of pictures and I printed them a little album to talk about it, to like be able to explain some of the things to like my nieces and nephews. You've got to have a loving eye for the place to capture it in a way that's going to give it justice.
So what do the people who actually carry out the restoration work make of the new status? I've come to meet one peat restorer on site. The digger driver here is tamping down on the peat with his shovel, and you can actually feel it wobbling. It's amazing. It shows you that we're on top of one big waterlogged sponge.
My name is Gary Mackay. I work for me and my father's company, John Mackay Limited. We have 5 full-time employees and sort of 3 part-time seasonal employees. We have about 14 of these specially designed low ground pressure excavators. They've been lightened and they've been modified to take wider track pads to spread the weight of the machine so that they don't sink in the flow country. And we've been involved in peatland restoration since 2003, I believe. It is good business. There are some pitfalls with it that we wish were a bit changed. The fact that you can only work out with the breeding bird season, and then because they're grant funded, sometimes you don't get the go-ahead for weeks after when the breeding birds have stopped. But the deadline at the end when the breeding birds start again doesn't change, and that causes some headaches, especially up here in the north of Scotland when you get weeks of snow at times that stops play.
And you get 5 hours, 6 hours daylight.
Exactly, yeah. And it just makes life all the more difficult. I would think that it is partly due to the work that we've done that they got the World Heritage status. I do have worries that it'll cause a bit more bureaucracy for the landowners that want to do work on their estates and things like that. So there is some worries that could cause an effect on our business in the summer months when we fall back to working for these estates and things, that maybe they'll be less likely to do things that they normally would be doing, or they'd find it too difficult to do. For the next few years, while the funding is all available, it should have a positive impact on our business model, especially here in the north where there's still quite an area to be done. After that, the concern is that once all the peatland restoration work is complete, there won't be ongoing work in the area, and that all of our work will slowly, gradually either fade out or move further south into other areas.
They came from the city looking so sleek, in their barber jackets, green wellies and feet. They told us that our land was unique, then they made it an SSSI. They gave us a list of things not to do now, like feeding your sheep, or using a plough, or taking your motorbike across the flow on their precious SSSI.
Crofter Sandy Murray, whose land is in the heart of the flow country, wrote that protest song about an earlier wave of conservation designations, but he has the same concerns about the UNESCO tag.
We've got just far too many layers of bureaucracy on top of us, which started with the end of the 1800s. It went onto the Crofting Act in 1955, and then we had the SSSI designation, then that Sites of Special Scientific Interest, the SAC, SPA.
SAC is Special Area of Conservation.
SPA, Special Protection Area for wildlife and birds. We've got grazing regulations on us, which governs what we can do on the grazings. And then we've got all the other agricultural implications to do with environmental schemes, etc. The World Heritage Site now, does it actually just put another layer on top that you've got to dig through before you get down to the second one?
So So what are your concerns about the World Heritage Site?
My main concerns are the implications that it'll have on us as crofters in relation maybe to planning permission. It could be negative implications on it. But then the main negativities I see as crofters is the stocking densities, where we're governed to what stock we can actually put on it. One of the other slight problems with control is access. There's a lot of places that you're not supposed to go with your four-wheel bike, etc., in any of the middle of the floughs and the really soft bits. So you've got to pick your routes far more than you used to have when you went gathering to the hill. Last time I gathered our side of the common grazing for taking the sheep in for tipping, I did 63 mile on my four-wheel quad, and I'm still 25 sheep short.
So this is all the impact of the existing regulation, and you're concerned that World Heritage status will magnify that?
Yeah, it's just going to be another layer on top of it, and I can't see it being a layer that's going to simplify it. I think we've got 7 World Heritage sites in Scotland, but they all just seem to be things that are stagnant, things that are not allowed to develop and not allowed to move forward. The Forth Road Bridge and the Old Town in Edinburgh, etc. You know, they're historic sites that are not allowed to move forward. So that's probably what's going to happen here too. It's going to be tried to be left the way it is. But what is the way it is? You know. We're just coming to the bunkhouse, which is the old mill. It was built 1856 by my great-great-grandfather. We've got the old mill stone as a coffee table.
So you've got what's basically a tourism business here as part of your operation. Do you not think that the flow country status will help with that?
It should do. You know, there should be more turnaround, I should say, or more people. The North Coast 500 has taken an influx of tourists in, but they seem to just want to pass through. They don't seem to want to stay. They just tour right round and do all their shopping in Inverness and then get back to Inverness. Whether the flow country will get them to stay, but then, you know, do you want people, if it's a World Heritage Site and protected, do you want people tramping over it? I am open-minded because now, once it is designated and there, it's not going to go away. And it's not going to affect me that much, because I'm coming to end of life in another, well, if I get another 10 years at 85, I'll be happy. But once it's there, you see all the other World Heritage Sites around the Great Wall of China and the pyramids and that. It does attract people. It's just how many people the infrastructure in the Highlands and in the flow country can actually contain. That's going to be the crux of the matter in the future.
We're standing here on the side of the Kyle of Tongue, which is an inlet off the Peatland Firth.
Frances Gunn has a croft at Tongue on the northern edge of the flow country, the north coast of Sutherland. She had her doubts when the World Heritage status was suggested.
Would this be affecting any development that might be coming on, that might bring jobs, that might bring children and young people and restock our schools, so to speak?
The government agency NatureScot says development is already highly limited in the flow country due to its many other nature designations. That means that although the status is technically a consideration for council planning officers, it shouldn't make very much difference. But because of her concerns, Frances took on the role of chair of the local steering group behind the bid.
I wanted to make sure that the culture and the community and the history of the area was all part of this bid, and it wasn't just going to be all about the environmental side and other people were just going to be trodden over in the process. I thought to be part of it is better than to be sitting moaning from the outside. Everybody had something that they were worried about, be it forestry or fishing that was going to be under some sort of threat. So we worked very, very hard to make sure every voice was heard and that we could come to something that was as agreeable as possible for everybody. And in the end, there was no threat at all to crofting. And in fact, I think there was a recognition by people that the reason that they had a World Heritage Site here was because our ancestors, the old crofters and people like that, had looked after the area so well. And it was our husbandry really that had made the area what it is today.
This programme was produced and presented by me, Richard Baynes.